distinguish between different types of pet. The nutrition system includes patient benefits and veterinary health care, often called OPEB or the post-employment benefits. Democrats want to separate the recommended for-framing system-wide liability into two separate parts: the employment pension and the unapplied to the OPEB segment. This misinterpretation of state law code Democrats to spend more money on programs right now instead of using the money to pay off debt. That's a terrible idea to use that. There's been some progress in paying off debt over the past few years, but we're nowhere close to the finish line. The teacher retirement system has over $32 billion in unfunded liabilities overall. Last year alone, we spent 32 cents on the only state district and schools coming down on the teaching retirement system. We're taking nearly a third of working-age dollars from the classroom today to pay these bills. The more quickly the debt is paid off, the pension costs taxpayers overall in the long run, because interest costs will be reduced. It's the same principle that applies to the mortgage or credit card or your car payment. If you have to pay less now, you're going to pay significantly more later. We cannot reduce our debt payments now and expect our kids to pay more in taxes later. We cannot risk opening this school-employed retirement system and putting benefits in pension. I support this amendment and keep our debt payments on schedule if we're going to wait in the teaching retirement system. I'm offering an amendment related to the future educator scholarship and student-teacher stipend programs contained in this budget proposal. These are good programs, but will help new educators with the schooling and classroom experience they need as they prepare to launch their teaching careers. These are programs they know well because they help create the budget negotiations and serve as loss negotiations here. Like our long-term teaching shortage and learn to find a moving needle fighting for pipeline continues. But it is good to make these programs carefully treat teacher young students and student teachers differently depending on where they go to school and where they decide to stay and teach. The student teachers stipend program is open only to student teachers assigned to public schools. This creates a strange dynamic. For instance, let's say two college classmates get their student teaching assignments. One is assigned to a public school, the other is assigned to a private school. Why is your the student assigned to the public school receive a stipend while you're training from the same university? The teacher that carries scholarship is a similar flaw. Recipients of the scholarship can only teach in public schools. Your risk of getting yourself a scholarship grant if you get it as a private school. And it's very much forcing me to leave the public schools were eligible. That last year, Democrats continued. This should not be an us-versus-them discussion. Public and public schools are best when they work together. I went to a Catholic school for 8th grade. It was uncommon for young teachers to start at a Catholic school and move to a public school after gaining some experience. Additionally, I did not have a public school because non-public school students come from the public school from another high school. That's exactly what I did. As we try to help all of the kids here, it's thriving today. And all of these parents make choices too. I just think those who work now should us to be very diverse, inclusive, and equitable. This is a case of fairness. These crypto accounts need to be open to those teaching in public and public schools alike, and even access to the This amendment would continue our state's efforts to increase special education funding in Michigan, and would invest more in much like proposed in Setbacks program is unfortunately as a group initiatives that keep our kids safe to be from school. If there is a need for safe sidewalks and intersection process to get our kids to school, let's do it. But let's do it with a different budget and a general flow where we're not using it as point leaders. It's possible it can be included in the development of the transportation budget after other community departments. So if everyone budget budgets definitely in traffic and hazardous safety, it's a good goal. And that's why we have existing revenues to support these types of projects and budgets. Thank you for all of your support on that in the special education schools. Previously, I should have been able to highlight the working in the school medical schools. One use of this option for us approach is helping kids focus their residential surrounding neighborhoods. This allows identify school districts to regulate the use of funds in classrooms and Christian schools. Districts that adopt healthy policies and receive the increase in financial loans provided in support. Smart housing accommodates group part of society as well as behind that. It is a typical place for usage and it recognizes how meaningful is after an awful emergency. Many parents and educators have told me for these districted students it makes their anxiety level and otherwise negatively impact on their ability to learn. Research published last year by Intelligence Media in association with the researchers from the University of Michigan, CSI Children's Hospital, outlined the problem. On a typical day, teens within the study receive a median of 237 notifications from the outside world. About a quarter of those came within the school day. It's a lot of things and messages, not even mention the police to stay focused on the lessons. During school hours, almost half the participants use their phones at least once. Overall, during school hours, youth use their phone for a median of 43 minutes. And that's more than 6 hours in some cases. University districts already have phone policies in place. As public administrators have implemented these policies and they have made regrets. These tools are addictive and they are a distraction in the classroom. They should advocate for policies that improve student outcomes and mental health. And for reasons that result in introduced later. All of these measures that don't do enough to address the main problems facing universities and community colleges today. The issue facing most of our public universities is declining enrollment. For example, the enrollment drop since the 2011-12 fiscal year is roughly 40% or more. For Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan, Florida State, Secretary of State, Northern Michigan, Saginaw Valley, and Western Michigan. Lake Superior School and Eastern, they're both over a 40% drop. The only two near that end are Michigan State and Michigan Tech, saw enrollment increases. If failure to action due to apples problem soon, it's possible that not all of the universities will survive. The cost of attending universities is a factor for many students, obviously. On the other hand, enrollment has been stable for a few universities. Including units is at the high end of the cost spectrum. So accessibility alone is not the issue. Instead of attracting feeling to accessibility, eliminating the issue tuition program outside the graduate and heavily with financial need for attending nonprofit independent colleges. Fixed cost of universities to a large extent reflect the number of students enrolled. If you believe this happen, you have to come up with ways to reduce the fixed costs. So what can the state do to help? Cutting funding we had last year was a good idea, but we are getting away from that now. This funding will help universities pay for upgrades, which they're going to have to pay for one way or the other. And it has the added benefit of reducing fixed costs over time. I also propose that we allow time payments to be able to use regular funding since it's free up time. Even though we may need to, the university system will reduce backlog and expects the service from these receivers and improve their results going forward. And I must also acknowledge the general perception of university community. It is effective and the effective decisions people make about when you go or where not to go. will be better served if Wilson is improving academic support. It is worth noting, nothing we offer these questions is free. No school interest, no student loan, no off-now community college tuition. With free lecture means it's paid for each taxpayer. Whatever you call it. This month, I recommend $35 million of funding for two priorities at our universities. The first is to make $2.5 million university capital outlay. The second priority is called $5 million funding to buy young student count for each university that can be used for infrastructure, technology, equipment maintenance, safety, and resort. One of the closing aspects of funding university government is our capital outlay process for our universities and community colleges. We have a relatively elaborate steering process that is used for our university budget office, which reviews projects and legislature reviews because it's unpredictable and irregular schedule. And as we found out last year, the rating system was really more of a suggestion because projects can be added or dropped based on clinical actions. On top of that, capital outlay is funded using debt, which further adds future costs both to the state and to the universities. One proposal is to be reduced amount. Here I am offering $1.5 million to each university on an annual basis. Schools then can save up cash for projects on a predictable basis and plan to figure out what the future for capital improvements on our campus. In regards to item funding, universities have a lot of fixed costs and different costs of required upgrades and maintenance that we need over time. Previously, we're using this funding to allow for debt pay down. And right now, it goes a step further and requires at least 15% of funding to go toward more liabilities. We hope this funding line item in the current year budget has been widely accepted as a responsible use of funding amongst the institutions of education. Like capital outlay, but improving the funding and ongoing for our schools is productive into the future. I encourage my colleagues to support this work. For years and years, legislators on both sides of the aisle have complained about using school aid dollars for higher education. It is allowed under the Constitution, but it is far from ideal. It wasn't common practice to a decade or so ago. Last year, we had to make this shift. With minimal impact on the federal budget, we decided to make that rejected a proposal. We may have missed an opportunity last year, but there is no taking away the present. This is the issue we should work together on, so I hope you can make it this year. This practice is no longer necessary. The Senate budget proposal before us today reduces over $451 million in school-aid money in higher education. I know that we ensure that the higher education budget is funded entirely to the state's general fund, making the school education. There have been various studies on how much universities are spending on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. DEI for sure. At the University of Michigan alone, not recently, the college of excellence estimated there are more than 240 mid-sized universities named in the charge to provide DEI programming and services. The total annual payroll cost of full-time DEI staff is estimated at more than $30 million, including wages and benefits. That money can be used to cover in-state tuition and fees for roughly 1,700 undergraduate students. The DES license has a lot of money. Based on the reviews I have seen from previous academic years, it appears DEI spending is increasing rapidly. It's not just a spending that is a concern. I support the goals of diversity and inclusion, but I'm for healthcare and college journey. We must be careful that these programs do not cross the line into initiatives that categorize individuals for preferential treatment based on race, sex, or anything else. We must be careful that these programs do not become abused to advance insecurity ideology. Concerns about that is what contributed to the shutdown of DEI programs in Florida and California. Diversity and inclusion can be improved by creating separate bureaucracies and research departments. This is better than adopting an estimated 2% of universities' operating spending. I have prepared a report on this one. This year, based on this topic, it's going to speak up. states have more solid enemy attacked it and people started to find one and it gets pretty well throwing it at it. And again, when you start to do clients, what about sleeping in time? Theory is something country is around the people. That's the reason when these organizations, the hostess terrorist organizations, that use tactics that we make their own of the free society to not live up to what they want. We do not respect law. We do not adhere to laws. We do not condone them. We do not dismiss organizations that do not like them. All of the acts, not only do they not like the school academic to not denounce you as a human asshole like all that. They try to bring forward as a senior. It didn't work out. We had a kind of independent lawsuit that they received at that. I agree. Like how they do several years to speak up. To speak up, that's what I think is good actually good at that. It's useful to someone. Listen to them and listen. Don't like to just put your stuff to me. This is very true too. And that's the organization that we're holding on to. That's what they're doing. Supporting the United States of designated terrorist organization. And they should not be against the organization. They should not be state tax dollars or taxpayers funding them. This is the type of environment where I said, oh, you know, I would one of the reasons we want to be reducing my college, you know, and very much is very tax costs and dollars to start your country's school. But I said, no, it's our country. It's not sending a very good message. We should be sending a very good message to our parents. You know what? We must support our country. We're going to make sure that our kids are learning good values. Thank you very much for doing it. And I want to get somebody those new things to teach being eligible to receive scholarship funding. The readers asked that the college and university must have a board-approved policy of inclusion and non-discrimination. It also spells that the state cannot be involved in a program working toward a degree in theology, divinity, or religious education. There are two different things going on here, so I'll talk about each one separately. First, it is ironic that the language is introduced diversity and inclusion is going to exclude people. It is not going to develop any embrace of creating instead of limited and seems confusion. My amendment is not screening for equal diversities to have a good policy of inclusion and non-discrimination. Far from it, I support the idea that economic influence also determines society. Inclusion means equality for each individual person is infinite degree and must have equal opportunity based on challenges best in same skill or less than. Non-discrimination means that the school needs to ensure that the individual rights of each student are protected under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. It has been intended to be written since I found it, and I don't understand how equal justice and opportunity before the law. The language proposed in this bill is written twice to circumvent that idea. It seeks to include in my identity. This ideology seeks to include all peoples in conformity, right? Equal opportunity and diversity for them. Equal opportunity is not the same as equality. The second provision in this law is provides equal opportunity for scholarships for students working toward a degree in theology, divinity, or religious education. My amendment proposes that it should be opposite. Education students cannot be denied opportunities open to all students. As the second report on education legislation fully supports and affirms the American idea of religious preservation, which is that no religion to the American public and that all opinions are welcome to be studied. I understand the need to include funding if the intent Christ and sustain religion, which is the Constitution. But that clearly is not the goal. This whole language I propose explicitly states that all opinions are welcome, echoing the theme of diversity and inclusion among the foundation of faith. spontaneous budget. The budget also contains elements that should be in the Department of Education budget. Our Constitution says the Department of Education shall serve as the general planning and coordinating body of all public education, except for certain powers reserved to state universities. The government proposes to fund the create department restricting funds and employees from all departments, primarily the Department of Education. It's an attempt to strip away the power from the separately elected state board of education. This superintendent selects and leaves all the power to the governor in order to create legal rules. The committee process is early representatives are entitled to have the constitutional authority to act as the general planning and coordinating body for public education. That was told now it doesn't come in charge of the governor to continue to support leading for our John and Holy Kingdom and actually graduate university. The governor agrees follows the Constitution of Missouri. There are some components in there that are constitutional, such as child care components, for example. But there are some areas that must be left to the state board again, and the unions and the superintendent. This includes education planning and coordinating programs that learn the business to grade. I did desire to reform the structure of the Department of Education. I'm describing it only some of our reforms, but I cannot rely on run around our state constitution. This isn't a commentary on the merits of law economy. It's a commentary on the attempt to create a moral entity to the Department of Education in place of under the governor's direction. It's a order read by the governor to realize all of the Constitution and it was also the Department of Education. But it's not. And so this was the beginning of this. I urge my colleagues to follow the Constitution or Supplements 64A instead of 69. This bill would allocate $250,000 to establish a task force to study and make recommendations to reduce credit absenteeism among students in Michigan. This week, the school district I talked to mentions what a struggle has become to make kids to regularly attend class. Before the pandemic, during the 2018-19 school year, the state reported that 19.7% of Michigan's public school students were considered chronically absent. In the 2022-23 school year, after meetings with students were over, 30.8% of students were considered chronically absent. At the individual school